Okay, so right now we have on our stage is an really trailblazing academic, Aunnie Patton Power, and she's done amazing work in the impact investment space. She's an academic. She's a founder of a company that deals with the impact investment space called Intelligent Impact. She's also the founder of a company called Impact Finance Pro, and she's also an angel investor. So we have a lot of entrepreneurs in the audience today, and Aunnie will give you sort of direct sort of advice about investing and how to position your startup. And yeah, we're going to learn a lot about impact investment. She's going to do a workshop, and she's also just recently released a book like we spoke about yesterday, launched a book called Adventure Finance, and that'll give you guys insight into how to raise finance innovatively and not just sort of the vanilla ways of raising finance. So Aunnie, thanks so much. Thanks for your time, and we look forward to your workshop.
Wonderful. Hello, everyone. I'm looking forward to engaging with all of you. So because this is a workshop, I would like it to be very much geared to what you guys want to learn. So what I will ask you to do, I'm going to give a little bit of an overview of impact investing. What I'm going to ask you to do is in the chat, and I'm sure you're all experienced at this by now, but make sure and select everyone so everyone can see your chat. Please tell me what you're wanting to get out of this workshop today. What are you wanting to learn? So I do, as an academic and an advisor, I work on creating these types of workshops and content, and I have hundreds of hours of content and endless amounts of ideas for you as entrepreneurs in the impact investing space. But I would like for you to be able to guide this. So please, in the chat, tell me what it is that you most would like to know, what you'd like to learn, and we'll use that chat to be able to guide this. So just to kick it off, impact investing, as hopefully many of you know, is an approach to investing that looks for positive social impact, environmental impact, as well as positive financial return. So I think the first thing right off the bat to remember about impact investing is that the investors that you are engaging with are looking for your financial viability as well as your social and your environmental impact. Oftentimes, what people think, especially entrepreneurs in this space, is that if I have enough social impact, then it doesn't matter how much money I'm making, or if I have enough money that I'm making, it doesn't matter about my social impact. And in reality, both of these things are very important. And while there is a spectrum of impact investors and different returns that they are looking for, impact investors are looking for financial viability. So great, we've already got some excellent questions coming in. So this is great. These are really good questions. So keep them coming. And then just the next thing, just to know before we start addressing any other questions over on the side, which are great, is that impact investing works across all different types of capital. So it's not just about early stage equity investing or debt investing. There are impact investors that are willing to do a whole range of capital. And that's, as Corey mentioned, is what my book is about, Adventure Finance. And it's really a guide to be able to help you understand the different options for investment. And we can talk a bit about some of those today, if you'd like, if that's one of the kind of areas that you'd like to go into. So okay, got a couple of questions to start out. I'm going to actually go with Nicola's first. A better understanding on the investment landscape in South Africa, especially opportunities to begin impact investing themselves. Great. So Nicola, we're starting from the funder side. So in general, the impact investment landscape in South Africa. So it has certainly been growing. I started working on kind of helping to build the landscape when I moved to South Africa over 8 years ago now, almost 9 years ago. And there's a vibrant set of impact investors that exist in early stage, in more growth stage investors, and there's beginning to be more angel investors in South Africa as well. If you're interested in angel investing anywhere, but particularly in South Africa, it is something that I would suggest, as if you have a bit of disposable income, you can get together with friends and even create your own impact investing, angel investing option. So I've actually done that with 19 of my friends in Joburg and Cape Town. We have an angel investing syndicate that's called Dazzle Angels, because Dazzle is, as many of you know, a group of zebras, and zebras have both have stripes, black and white stripes, and zebras are real as opposed to unicorns. And so zebras is a term that we use to refer to companies that are trying to create positive social impact as well as financial return. Those are the black and white stripes. And those are the types of companies that we look for as angel investors. So we look for companies that are trying to mix profit and purpose. And the minimum amount for angel investing, there is no minimum amount. People write 3,000 Rand checks to 100,000 Rand checks to 1,000,000 Rand checks. You can do in South Africa, equity investing is equity crowdfunding is not yet legal. There are a couple of companies that are working with the regulators to do it. So there are a couple of platforms that you can start to play around with. And that once that happens, then we'll be able to hopefully do angel investments from like 500 Rand. But right now, you have to do a little bit bigger checks. That's why getting together in a group can be really nice. So just in general, I'm just going to pull up my slides here to show you. Here we go. Just going to share my slides here. So as far as landscape goes, you'll find in South Africa, we have investors that sit across the entire spectrum. So from traditional investments that don't factor in impact to responsible and sustainable investments. These include ESG funds that are listed on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, to impact investing funds, such as impact investing private equity and venture capital funds. Most of these private equity and venture capital funds are looking for what they consider market rate returns. So they would be looking for very similar returns to other investors that are investing in similar size projects. We also have some investors that are looking for impact first returns. So they may be more interested. These would be potentially foundations that are doing things like low-cost loans and other types of investments into more socially impactful organizations. We have some venture philanthropists, and these are philanthropists that are looking to blend both philanthropy as well as investment. And then obviously we have traditional philanthropic investments. So there's there's lots of development across the entire continent, but I would say the South African ecosystem from an impact investing perspective is quite robust, where we do have investors across each of these areas. And the next question, of course, that everyone asks is, how do you find the impact investors? And it's a very, very good question. So unfortunately, there is not one single place to find impact investors. I wish that there was. If there was, I would direct you there in a heartbeat. It would save me tons and tons of time if I could direct you to a specific place. But what I have done here, I'm just going to share this in the chat, is I wrote a LinkedIn article with all of my best tips on how to find impact investors for your social enterprise. And I'm just going to put that in the chat here. So there's a variety of different places that you need to look, including different platforms, looking at, oops, sorry, I ditched the panelists. See, I did my own, I didn't listen to my own instructions. There we go, that's to everyone now. There is a variety of platforms that you can look for, but to be completely honest, just like any type of fundraising, it comes back to a lot of just legwork. So what I suggest when you're looking for investors or impact investors is to look at other companies that are similar to you, look at who invested in them. Conferences are a great place to look at, you know, who's investing, who's showing up at conferences, looking at the individuals and organizations that are writing pieces on impact investing that are being profiled. In the article that I've shared with you, there's a few platforms that do have investors listed. And there's a growing number of organizations that are trying to build up platforms that'll make this easier. It's just always it's a difficult one. Definitely, it's a difficult one. All right. How do I attract impact investments? How do I position myself to get a high return on investment? This is a very good question. So when you're looking for impact investment, you have to make sure that you're positioning yourself from a financial return perspective as well as from a social perspective. So one of the things that you have to think about is who you are targeting as a customer. If you are an potential impact investment, if you're a social enterprise or a purpose-driven company, you are going to be addressing individuals that are underserved. This can mean people that we refer to as the base of the pyramid. So these are individuals, you know, making less than $3,000 a year. This is that definition is very, very broad, but essentially individuals that are at the base of the economic pyramid. You may also be working with the missing middle, which is SMEs that are small and medium-sized enterprises that are too big for microfinance and too small for traditional bank loans. So helping to do financial inclusion for those, or any individuals or communities that the market doesn't serve. So one of the things that you need to highlight when you are pitching to impact investors is who your target audience is and why they're underserved. If you have developed a product that is specifically for people that are, you know, uber wealthy living in Santon, it's going to have to be, I don't know, pulling carbon out of the atmosphere to be able to qualify for an impact investment. Otherwise, you're going to need to be able to show how the product that you're creating is helping individuals that are underserved. Now, when I say underserved, it does not always mean socioeconomically disadvantaged. It means individuals that are being underserved. So this can be women, people that are previously disadvantaged. This can be youth. There's a lot of different ways in which you can look at the market and see who's not being served and why does my product help to address that market gap. And that's something that you have to be able to articulate in your pitch. Impact investors are a variety, as I said, of different types of funders. So you also need to think about what type of funder are you looking for when you're going out to pitch. So are you looking for a venture capital fund? And if so, if it's an impact investor, then you'll also have to think about the expectations from a venture capital fund, which is that you are a fast growing enterprise. Now, alongside that, you're going to have to think about your impact thesis, which is included in part of it is the who you are serving is certainly a piece of that. So I'm sorry, I'm just going to skip through these because I want to answer this question. These will be slides will be the link to these slides will be made available to you after the. All right, I'm just going to skip to another part of the presentation. Got lots of slides here. So I'm just going to skip to another part of the presentation to finish answering this very good question about how do you position yourself to attract impact investing. Okay. All right, there we go. There we go. All right. right. So when you're thinking about your positioning, you need to think about your impact thesis. And this is an overview of something called the Impact Management Project. And they've created these dimensions of impact. And so one of the things that when you articulate your impact thesis, you can think about are these different dimensions to be able to better articulate your thesis. So the first dimension is what type of outcome are you achieving? So this is the what. So essentially, what are you doing as an organization? Let's take an organization, for instance, that is doing deliveries of pharmaceuticals into townships. So let's say they're using bicycles and scooters to be able to deliver these pharmaceuticals, these prescription drugs. So the type of outcome is access to pharmaceuticals, to prescription drugs, and it's and whether or not it's important. It would be very important to the individuals that otherwise would not have access, potentially the elderly or others that wouldn't be able to, the very sick that wouldn't be able to get out and get their prescriptions. Now, the next piece is how much does the effect occur in the time period? So this is how short-term, long-term is your effect. So this is a short-term effect. Someone gets their medication, and so we can measure whether or not it happened very quickly. So this means that when you are talking about your impact in your pitch, you'll want to say, we're going to be delivering these pharmaceuticals, these prescription drugs to individuals. They will receive them, based off of their order time, and we'll be able to track whether or not they are happy with that service. And then the next thing, as I mentioned before, is around who experiences the effect and how underserved are they. So who are you working with? So for instance, in this case, we are looking at underserved individuals, potentially the elderly and the ill within low-income areas. So you would articulate that in your pitch, as opposed to necessarily doing deliveries in a wealthy part of South Africa. And then the next two are really around contribution and risk, which has more to do on the investor side. But being able to articulate the what, how much, and the who can really help you to build out your own impact thesis of your organization, which can help you to articulate the type of impact that you're having, as well as the type of financial return. What you have to be able to talk about is why this impact is also related to the financial return that you're going to get as a company. Sure, I see there's a lot of questions coming in. That's excellent. So Zunaid, hopefully that helps a little bit with some of the KPIs. So one of the things that I would say around measurement, let me just pull up some measurement here. So from a measurement perspective, there are, so there's a few different ways in which we think about measurement. So thinking about your KPIs, which we talk about as impact data. So there's these different kind of principles of practice that are used by impact investors, including the IFC operating principles, the principles for responsible investing. So those are what impact investors use themselves to be able to hold themselves to best practices. And then some of what we call standards of practice, including the Impact Management Project, which I just talked about. The SDG is another one. So if you are pitching for impact investing, one of the things, the language that a lot of investors as well as social entrepreneurs use is the Sustainable Development Goals. So being able to talk about how you're achieving these. And if you go to the website, so just Google Sustainable Development Goals and metrics, you'll actually come up with their underlying metrics for each of the Sustainable Development Goals. So you can pull those out and actually look at how you can deliver on those. And then also there's something called IRIS. So IRIS is from the Global Impact Investing Network. And so if you can pull up, I'll see if in a minute I can throw some of these links in here as well. the Gen Iris. And essentially that is an entire platform that allows you to choose different types of metrics and it talks also about how you can collect the data for those metrics. And that's incredibly useful. And showing investors that that you're collecting data that's both important to the impact of your organization as well as the strategy of your organization, i.e., what do my customers look like? Because I need to know what my customers look like to be able to better serve them. But also, what do my customers look like? Because I need to talk about the reason for which we have chosen to address this customer segment, because it is underserved and there is opportunity here. So it's this combination of both financial and social goals. All right. There's a question here around tax. So right now, impact investing in South Africa does not have any tax benefits. And that's true in most parts of the world. I do personally hope that at some point there are many parts of the world where there are starting to be some tax incentives for investors. So for instance, in the UK, similar to the now defunct Section 12J, which allowed for some tax breaks for angel investors and early stage investors, there was one in the UK that allowed for tax breaks for impact investors as well, that did early stage investing. And I think that's something that could be really useful in South Africa, but currently there are no tax breaks for impact investing in South Africa. How do I find investors? Talked a little bit about that. Tips for impacting international markets. So just as anyone, whether you're moving to an international market as a social enterprise or not, obviously you need to think about the business dynamics of those international markets. And if you're looking for international investors, then I would definitely follow the tips that I've put in my article there, looking at different reports and platforms. There are a variety of platforms, and I put links in there that do showcase different impact investing funds. But one of the things that I would 100% recommend is make sure you understand the type of funding that you're looking for as an entrepreneur. Do you need equity funding? Do you need debt funding? Do you need some time of working capital funding? So what do you really need as yourself for your organization? And this is one of the things in my book that I've laid out. I've created a framework around this for entrepreneurs that really goes through the evaluation that you need to think about for your own self. So you need to understand who you are as an organization before and what type of capital you need before you go out and look for investors. And this is true whether you're not looking for impact investing or not. You need to make sure that you understand as an organization what your own business model is, how you're going to make capital, how you're going to track your own impact before you go start talking to investors. And then what I'd also say is really research your investors before you approach them. I get emails all the time for investments that don't come anywhere close to my mandate. And one of my biggest pet peeves is getting "Dear Sir" emails that are BCC'd to who knows how many people that have nothing to do with what I do as an angel investor or who I work with, that obviously someone put no time into, just found my email off of something that was written up online and has blind copied me into that. And that's not how you build social capital, and that's not how you address impact. That's how impact investors or traditional investors. So really do your research, find the types of investors, and it's a bit of a treasure hunt. As I said, there's no individual place, one place to go, but find your investors that are investing in the sector that you are in the size of company that you currently are, in the geography that you are, and then understand kind of why they fit with your own impact thesis. And then when you write to them or when you look for an introduction to them, you need to discuss why that is. So when you approach them, and whether it's a cold email or a warm introduction, or you're at a conference and you've approached them, you need to be able to talk about why you are a good fit for that organization. So I'm just going to pull up another set of slides here. We'll also make these available. Here you go. So here's the evaluation that I created for the book to think about you as a founder. So the questions you need to ask about your own company is who you are. So how are you registered? So if you're a nonprofit, you can definitely go out and raise debt funding, but you can't go out and raise equity funding because you actually don't have shares to sell. So that's an important designation. So just understanding your registration obviously limits some of the different ways in which type of capital that you can register or that you can raise. How do you make money and who are your customers? What stage company are you? So how early stage or late stage of a company are you? And what are your growth projections? Are you looking at having incredibly fast growth and you're wanting to, achieve unicorn status? Or are you looking at more stable growth? What makes the most sense for your company? And then thinking about how mission driven you are. So how embedded is mission in your company? How deep does your impact thesis go? Do you really think about, as a management team, do you really think about impact in all of the decisions that you make and in your strategy? Or is it something that is kind of more superficial, which is fine within your company? And also, do you have an impact track record? Have you been collecting data to be able to show how you are achieving this impact? And then understanding how much funding you need, what you want to spend it on. If you have any assets available for collateral, so collateral is often used in debt financing, how you want to pay your funders back. Do you want to pay them back over time with the profits or the revenues from the company, or do you want to have investors that exit at a later period, so 7 or 10 years down the line when you exit for a large multiple? And then what are your own ownership expectations? Are you happy to sell a big portion of the company upfront to an investor that is potentially going to work with you, or would you rather continue to own the company? And then the type of funding you're going to need in the future, and how involved do you want your funders to be? And so this is the framework for the book that I've written that really, the entire book helps you unpack these questions and be able to think about what it means to match these to different types of funds that you can raise. And just a quick heuristic here is that if you have mission that's embedded in your governing documents, if you're a social enterprise that has an impact thesis that's written into your registration documents, if this is really part of your strategy, or if you have a verifiable track record, so you can collecting data and you can show that you have impact, then you can consider things like grants, even as a for-profit entity, or things like forgivable or low-cost loans, or other types of impact-linked finance. If you have physical assets and a credit history, or if you have a guarantee from a funder, you can think about secured debt. This is potentially debt from a bank or from a lender, from an impact investing lender. If you have invoices or purchase orders, or you have a history of fulfilling orders, you can think about something called invoice factoring or purchase order financing, or something called supply chain financing, which we also have here in South Africa, which allows you to take those orders and essentially borrow against them. If you have recurring revenue, you can think of something called revenue-based financing, also something that we have here in South Africa. And then if you already have venture capital funding, you can think about something called venture debt. Otherwise, thinking about equity and kind of what's called mezzanine debt and different types of structured exits. If you are a fast-growing company that is planning to return capital to investors later in your life cycle. All right, that was a lot of information. I'm going to keep going. I'm down here in the questions. What are the things one needs to do to set up a business well to attract impact investors? So having a well-defined impact thesis, a well-defined statement of, a well-defined business model, and making sure that those are integrated. So good impact investors are not interested in companies that have a business model on one side and then impact that they do on the other side. It's very much about having it integrated into your business. So for instance, let's take the example of financial inclusion. So one of the reasons that impact investors are so interested in investing in fintech companies that are addressing the unbanked, or those that are not included in traditional finance, is that there's a huge opportunity. There's a couple billion people that don't have access to formal financial services. So as a impact investor, you're looking for fintech organizations that are creating business models that are accessible, that are affordable, that provide good quality products for the underserved. And one of the reasons that they're interested in the affordability is that your products need to be affordable to as many people as possible for you to scale. And they also need to have equality, not just because you want to create access and to be able to help individuals that are accessing financial services for the first time, but also if you don't have quality products, people won't continue to use them and they won't refer them on. So the idea of having, you can be a organization that is addressing financial inclusion in a really terrible way. You could create financial products that are, essentially ripping people off and sell as many of those as you wanted to. But a good impact investor wouldn't be interested in that model whereby you've created something that doesn't have a lot of value for individuals. They would want to see something that is creating value, that has a large market that can scale, and is really being able to make those decisions around impact and finance in an integrated way. So the next question Kenneth has here, which is a good one: at what stage of a business can you approach impact investors? So you can approach impact investors at any stage of your business. One of the things that I would say, though, and this is true of early stage investing regardless of impact, is that you need to make sure and think about how you actually create revenues, as well as just founding something and immediately going out and looking for external funding. So obviously you need to have capital to be able to kind of get stuff up and going. But I see a lot of entrepreneurs immediately go out to look and raise external funding before they've done a lot of work on themselves. And I understand that sometimes it's very difficult. Obviously, being an entrepreneur is something that is, costly, and you're not making an income yourself, and you probably have other considerations and other financial obligations. So that can be really difficult. But the longer you can wait to approach external investors, impact investors or not, the more value you can create in the business, and the more likely you will be to succeed at actually achieving external investment. Shlippy, I can invest my savings in the stock market, or I can invest in a friend's startup. How do you evaluate whether or not you do the stock market or the friend startup? Well, I would say if you only have a small amount of money, I would definitely do something that is a little bit more conservative. So potentially buying a unit trust would be a more conservative approach as opposed to a friend startup. One of the things that you have to think about when you are doing any sort of angel investing is that it is very risky. Early stage businesses fail most of the time. And so you should not be putting, your retirement savings into a friend's startup. You should definitely be able to be diversified. So one of the things that you have to think about is making sure you're spreading your capital across a lot of different opportunities. And so one of the things that I would say is, if possible, for angel investing, pool your funding with other people to invest in a few different startups. And then when you're doing the evaluation of those, you really need to look at what is the market, what does the team look like, thinking about on the product and technology. So really doing due diligence on those organizations. All right. Oh, these are a lot of comments here. We've got some questions over here. Here we go. All right. Many businesses that get funding are product-based, as they need equipment, raw materials. Do investors favor product-based businesses, and how can service-based businesses present themselves favorably, especially if they need funding to scale? Wow, that is an excellent question. So I would actually say that investors are interested in product and service-based companies, particularly one of the reasons that service-based companies, and this is where, the line between product and service can be a little bit blurred, because obviously you have software as a service. So you can have products that are that essentially can scale, but that actually act more like services. But service-based companies, so consulting firms and others, the issue can be the scalability. So it's what you need to demonstrate to investors if you are a service-based company and you are looking to expand, is how you are going to scale effectively with that capital. Granted, you need the capital to be able to scale, potentially hiring new individuals and training, et cetera. But you're going to need to be able to talk the investors through how their capital is going to be sufficient for you to scale. And if you cannot do that, if it looks as if you're going to continue to need more and more capital to be able to be pumped into the company, as opposed to taking the capital and being able to use that to leverage that to scale, then that's going to be really difficult. So service-based companies, if they have a path to scalability, either through using technology to be able to help scale beyond just individual human hours, can be really efficient, but otherwise you are going to struggle. So it's really about charting out that scalability and why that makes sense. Now, that being said, there are differences in the type of capital that you need. And so if you need just short-term capital to be able to, for instance, hire a few people, train them, and then you'll be able to repay that capital in a short period of time, then that would be what you'd be pitching, and you wouldn't necessarily be pitching for equity funding there. You'd be pitching for debt funding. All right. What do you think of the main areas of impact in South Africa and that African entrepreneurs should be aware of? It's a very good question, but what I would say is that it's difficult to pick an SDG. It is, when you think about, I often have my students choose their, so I tell them to look at the SDGs, and then they have to pick, how they would allocate, say they had 100 Rand, how they would allocate their 100 Rand. And then I have them make an argument for why. And you can make an argument for every single SDG. So water, why is water something that is water and sanitation is a fundamental right. And it's also something that entrepreneurs, there's a huge opportunity. There's a $4 billion opportunity just on the African continent alone in water every year. So there are huge opportunities. So water is something, and without water, how do you have, and hygiene, how do you have good health? You can't have, sufficient education if people don't have good health. And so you can talk about, well, that's the fundamental, right? But then what about education? If people don't have education, then they won't have. And so you can make an argument for and then talk about climate, and then talk about, it's every single SDG is important, and they're all interlinked. So what I always tell entrepreneurs and funders is that, you do need to prioritize based off of what you are wanting to address and what you see the opportunity and what your skills really lend themselves towards. There is some subjectivity from investors. Investors often choose, several subject areas for them to be able to invest in, and that for them are the important areas. But I would say, obviously climate is a huge topic globally, but that doesn't mean to say that none of the other SDGs are important. So there's so much need and so much opportunity on the continent that I would say, if you have a product or a service that is relevant to an underserved population and it has significant impact, then that is going to be valuable on the continent. Now, there are a couple of areas that are, I would say, have more capital coming into them. So financial inclusion is certainly one of them because of tech-based financial inclusion. That's been a very important piece, particularly now with COVID and with moving more towards using digital forms of payment. Another one is healthcare, and then another one is climate. Affordable housing certainly has a significant amount of capital going in. Something that has less capital, although it is very important, obviously, is education. And so that's an area that certainly is growing. And then finally, renewable energy. So there's a lot of capital that is interested both in a small scale energy production, such as pico solar systems, so small home solar systems, as well as large scale, like the South African REIPP, where we're creating large megawatts of energy. So across all of those different elements, there are opportunities. How do I know how much money to raise? This is a great question. And also in my book. So there's a very simple calculation that you need to make. So you need to create your financial projections. And so your financial projections should look at the expected revenue and you should do these by month for the next few years. What's your expected revenue? How many customers are you going to sell to? How much does each customer pay? So you should build a very simple or very complex, up to you, revenue model that looks at what is your expected revenue over the next 2-3 years, and then what are your expenses. And then those expenses need to be linked to your revenue. So what do you need to spend on to be able to get that revenue? So what products do you need to purchase? What technology do you need to invest in? How many people do you need to hire? So all of that needs to be in a spreadsheet. And then you need to look at, essentially, you do a sum of that. So you look at your revenue minus your expenses, and generally your expenses are going to be higher than your revenue, particularly at the beginning if you're scaling up the company. And then you look at what is the total shortfall. So over the next period of time, so let's say you are looking at being able to get your product out in 18 months, and then you're going to hit your sustainability, so where you're bringing in enough revenue to cover your costs at 2 years, then what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to look at what's the total amount of cash that I'm going to be spending in the next 2 years. And that's how much you're going to need to raise. So it's those revenues minus the expenses. And if you're not going to have any revenues, then it's all of your expenses. And that's the amount you need to raise. Because each month, the amount you're spending is something called the burn rate. And so that's going to be, you're going to need to make sure that you have enough for however long your runway is. So if you, for instance, have a burn rate of 100,000 Rand a month, and then you go out and you raise 1 million Rand, then that means that you will have 10 months of runway. So that means that either you're going to get a product up and going and you're going to start creating enough revenue to be able to pay your expenses after that 10 months, or you're going to raise another round of funding at the end of that, or at kind of in the middle of that 10 months, because it takes several months often to fundraise. Now, if you're looking for debt funding, it's a different calculation. You're going to actually look for what you're looking to buy, particularly assets or other types of inputs, and then you'll calculate that amount, and then go out and raise that amount. So the best thing that you can do is have projections in a spreadsheet to be able to back up the question of how much are you raising. So when the investor or the debt provider asks you how much you're raising, you can say, I'm raising this much, and this is why it gives me this many months of runway, or it pays for these assets, and I'll be able to pay you back for this amount. It's a great question. Can I pitch investors using just a business plan? How are investors likely to invest in a business? Well, it does depend on how good the business plan is, but generally the answer is no. So it's it's not that difficult to write a business plan. It's much more difficult to execute it. So if you are pitching with just a business plan, investors are going to, their first question is going to be, what have you done for this? Why should I put my capital at risk if you haven't put any of your own time or efforts or even any of your own money into this? One of the things investors really do like to see, for better or for worse, is some sort of traction or selling some sort of product, or at least individuals, downloading or trialing a product. And if you haven't developed a product, at least having some sort of basic framework or MVP. This is where, again, as I said, you often see entrepreneurs kind of going out with the idea and pitching the idea. And the thing is when it's just an idea, it's just difficult to get investors, whether impact or not, if you actually haven't put any sweat into it. And now this doesn't mean that you need to put all of your own money and, quit your job, but investors do want to see that you've put significant effort already into this, and that you have a plan for how you're going to build out the company, and also some experience in actually what you're talking about. So it's, if you haven't invested anything in the business from a time, effort, or money perspective, very difficult to convince others to put time, money, or effort into the business. All right. Are so-called traditional investors skeptical of impact investing? Is there anything that we can do to overcome these perceptions? Ooh, Courtney, it's a great question. The answer is yes. Less so than they used to be, though. I've been in impact investing space for about 12 years. And 12 years ago, I like to say, I got patted on the head a lot. Oh, it's a really nice thing you're doing, trying to sell people on, creating impact. And I would say that has changed, although a lot of the perceptions still exist. One of the biggest perceptions is that impact investors look for and achieve a lower return than traditional investors, and that's not necessarily the case. And so and the same thing with social businesses or impact entrepreneurs. So if you're an impact entrepreneur, that you're, looking for a lower return or a lower profit than other companies. And so, one of the things that as an impact entrepreneur, I'm sure many of you in the audience have found, is when you pitch a problem and that you're solving a social issue, investors go, oh, okay, you're a social thing, I'm not going to put my capital into you. And so my biggest advice here is frame the issue you're addressing in terms of numbers and scale. So when you're talking to, I talked about earlier around underserved, use that to your advantage. Talk about the level of underservedness, I don't know if that's a word, that you are addressing. Social issues that we're looking at as impact entrepreneurs are huge. And there's a huge opportunity in them. Now, a lot of traditional investors see them and don't see the opportunity. So it's your job as an impact startup to frame the opportunity. So instead of saying, oh, we're going to do financial inclusion because it's really important that people have bank accounts, you lead with 2 billion people don't have access to financial services, and they spend X amount every year on this product. We think that our product can actually help these individuals access financial services, save them time and money, and be able to encourage them to save whatever it is you're trying to do. So frame the opportunity. So make the investors go, oh, wow, that is a huge opportunity. It's a big market. There's individuals that do not currently that are underserved in the sense as they're looking for this product. So there's this demand, and so framing it like that, as opposed to any sort of like you should do this. Framing it instead as a huge opportunity. It's crazy if you overlook this, is the best way to get traditional investors on board for impact-centered businesses. All right, 2 more questions. Gosh, you guys have some great questions. How would you suggest people in peri-urban and rural areas transition from NGO models to social enterprises that can attract impact investors? In my experience, there are quite a number of people who are going the NGO model, which is dependent on donor funding instead of the enterprise model. Kenneth, this is a great question. I actually addressed this. I'm going to share a link within my online course. That's a free online course called Innovative Finance. It's on Coursera. And I'm going to share the link here. There's a variety of different revenue models that you can think of. So here's the Innovative Finance. Ooh, sorry, it's a really long link because I just Googled it quickly, but there you go. Oh, there it goes. It shows up. All right. Sorry, it's a really long link. But you can just also, if you Google it, Innovative Finance movie comes up. So there's a whole set of revenue options that you can think of. I'm going to go back to the original slides that I put up here. Here we go. So one of the things that I think about, Kenneth, when I'm talking about, there we go. Oh, where did my slides go? Kenneth, when I think about transitioning is I think about how our organizations can think about revenues. And here we go. And so really thinking about options to create new revenue streams and monetize current assets. So if you are a nonprofit organization that is creating positive social impact, what you need to identify is what type of impact you're creating and who is currently paying for it and who could potentially pay for it. And so I've got a few different types of revenue streams, including leasing assets and doing education and training, doing types of revenue sharing. We're running out of time, I see, so I don't have a chance to go into all of those, but I would suggest checking out the MOOC that goes into, there's actually 8 different types of revenue streams that I talk about. And that's how I suggest transitioning from a not-for-profit to either a social enterprise model or just a not-for-profit that makes revenue, is really thinking about the types of impact you're creating and the assets that you have and how do you monetize those. And there's a variety of different ways to think about monetizing those assets and working with different customers or different products. All right. Please share the baby steps for a startup and the stage at which you'd recommend pitching to investors. All right. So the first thing you need to do after you have come up with your idea is you need to think about, well, the business model. So write your business plan and test it out with individuals that have some experience, either building businesses or have experience with the issue that you're trying to address. And then really what I always suggest entrepreneurs do, if possible, is just build something. You know, if it's if you're trying to build something that is tech-based, build a really simple minimum viable product, an MVP, something that is, very, very simple, doesn't actually cost anything or very much at all. And that just allows you to test out some of the ideas that you have. And this is something that, you don't have to spend a lot of money to try and, whether it's a product or to do a service, just creating something that is an MVP that you can test out, see if people like it, how do they respond to it, what is it that you're actually addressing, talk through your business model with individuals, test out some of your assumptions in your business model. So it's really about you write this kind of business plan, this idea around, and one of the things I would suggest is check out the lean, here, I'll put up a link as well. So there's a social impact lean startup model, and I would suggest using this. Here we go. the business model. Here we go. This one here, it's a social business model canvas. Here you go. I'm going to share the link here. And this is my biggest suggestion for, so start out on that. Let's see if here, I'll just pull this up quickly. So even in this one page, being able to articulate your resources, your activities, your partners, your cost, your value proposition, your different distribution channels, your segments of customers. So you need to be able to map out what the organization is going to do and the impact that it's going to have. And then you just need to go test it. So whether that's building a product or building a service or talking about your assumptions with other individuals that have some experience, it's really important to test these things out and to put the effort in, so that if you go out and you pitch to investors, investors say, oh, your model is very similar to this competitor. You can say, yes, we're similar in these ways. We're not similar in these ways. Here's why we are a better choice. And this is what we've done that looks a little bit different. The problem is if you put kind of no effort into it and there's and you have an investor on the other side that's an expert in the area that you're trying to move into, and they ask you pretty simple questions that you haven't yet found the answers to or created some thoughts around, the investors will most likely walk away and will kind of think that you don't really have the knowledge that you need yet to be able to build out a business to address this issue. So the thing about social impact is that when you are pitching your business, you have to understand the opportunity from the market perspective, and that opportunity includes both the social and the environmental impact as well as the financial. So you need to be able to articulate your own company's social and environmental impact as far as an opportunity, as well as what your business model is going to be going forward and how that affects your financial projections. And I think I am pretty much out of time. So I'll just say thank you very much. I really enjoyed all of your questions. I'm going to put the link up here for the book. There is an ebook available that you can buy. And then also if you go on to this website, there's also a set of additional resources for you there. And you can order the book from Palgrave Macmillan. They do ship to South Africa. My publisher, Palgrave Macmillan, has been working on a deal with Take-A-Lot for years. Also, if you go onto there and sign up for the newsletter, I am planning to do some book events now that we can do events again in person, kind of. I'm planning to do some book events in Cape Town and Joburg and potentially up in Durban, and where I will have copies of the book and we'll be doing talks. And so those will be hopefully in the next couple of months. So if you sign up for the newsletter, I will tell you about those as well. Thank you so much for this time and platform, and best of luck to all of you. Thank you for all of the work you are doing to build out a better and brighter future. I really appreciate your energy and all of the efforts that you are putting into all of the things that you are all involved in. So thank you very much. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.